Hi there, I'm Jen. This is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be a fairly short wrap-up plus very tiny haul because I have not been reading many things that I can talk about. Most of the books that I've actually finished have been for the BookTube Prize, so I can't talk about that yet. I'm back reading in the nonfiction category again this time, and none of the books that made it to the final were books that I had read before, because in the middle there I was in translated fiction instead. And in addition to that, I started playing The Outer Worlds, and I just finished it today, although I was doing a spoiler-free playthrough, and I missed one of the companions, who was apparently one of the easiest ones to get. So how I missed him, I don't understand, but I might have to replay that section. In any case, you don't care about that. Let's talk about books. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is a book that I almost feel like I can't talk about properly because I don't remember it. It felt very, I want to say ethereal, not because it was particularly artsy or flimsy or anything like that, but just because I listened to the audiobook and I think I should have read it because the format just didn't work for me for the type of story that it is. And that was Mona Arshi's Somebody Loves You. It was narrated by the author, and I found it really hard to pay attention to because I didn't feel like it was being performed in a way that was holding my attention. Now, I don't have a great attention span for audio to begin with. I always say memoirs and poetry read by the author are what I would prefer to be the only thing that I listen to. But I was looking for something that was available now and a certain length, and this was that. So this is about a character named Ruby who is from a British Asian family, and it is about her childhood. She has what is probably a form of selective mutism. She doesn't speak, and we are in her mind as she's observing her family and her friends going through their day-to-day lives. And through most of the book, one of the things that hangs over it is that her mother is mentally ill and is occasionally taken away, and when she is in the family, there's quite a bit of tension over that. And then there is also a neighbor who is presumably some kind of pedophile. At some point, a cat dies. This sounds odd because, as I said, because I listened to it, none of it caught me. And I was about midway through it, maybe halfway, and I just thought I should be reading this because I think this is quite good, but I just couldn't hang on to any of the words, and I think that's what you need to do to appreciate it. So if you are like me and you don't have a good attention span for audio, please skip the audio of this because I think I would have appreciated this so much more if I had read it rather than listened to it. Next up, I read another book in Penguin's Green Ideas series, and this is Timothy Morton's All Art is Ecological. I read a New Yorker article that was basically a profile of their philosophy because they're an ecological philosopher, essentially. Philosopher prophet is what the back describes this. I will link to the New Yorker article below because I think that is in some ways more interesting than this, or not necessarily more interesting, but I think was a good introductory piece because I saw Heidi from My Reading Life talk about this, and I commented on her video that, the same morning I watched that video, I had just read this article, and I think my reaction to this book would have been far more negative if I had not read the article first. Because Timothy Morton's approach to ecology and to environmental issues is very poetic in a way that the back of the book describes it as provocative and playful. And I think if you read into that, you know this is going to be something that's playing with a certain amount of pretense or a certain amount of artsiness. And your humor or attitude towards that kind of thing is going to vary. I've said this before. The level of that I can't handle is Maggie Nelson's writing. That drives me crazy. That crosses the pretension line. This is very borderline for me. I enjoyed this because there are certain points where I felt like there was enough of a wink to the audience that, okay, you're talking about Immanuel Kant, but first there was what might have been a reference to a Talking Heads song, and I'm okay with that because there was both. And maybe you're talking to somebody who's humorless and they know that they're like, this person is humorless and they're kind of pretentious. I'm not sure if what I'm saying makes sense, but if you would like to see something that is essentially writing on nature that is extremely, extremely artistic, because I think some people complain about nature and environmental and ecological writing as being either too scientific on the one hand, or when it is written by journalists, too straightforward. and some people go to their reading exclusively for artistry, and I think this would be really interesting for that audience. But as I said, if I had not read the New Yorker article, I think I would have been more frustrated, and this would have crossed the pretentiousness line, because maybe there don't need to be so many metaphors when it comes to ice, but at the same time, it is different. And of the books in this series that I have read so far, this is the one that is the most stylistically interesting, and I think there is something to be said for that. So that's kind of cool. All right, and then I read Lejla Kalamujić's Call Me Esteban, which is translated by Jennifer Zoble. When I read this, I actually thought it was a novella, but since then I have discovered that the marketing has said that it's short stories. I think you could read either way. This is autofiction. The main character has the same name as the author, and the biographical details are basically the same. This is another book where I feel like a lot of the advertising led me astray, not just in the sense that it says short stories when it feels like a novella, because obviously that could go either way, but just in the sense that I'd seen so many pieces talking about this in terms of it being a kind of post-Bosnian War lesbian romance, and in no way is this a romance. The main character has a relationship that we visit at various points, but what this really is a visit into the main character / author's head and her childhood during the 1980s in Yugoslavia, growing up with grandparents and with her father and with a mother that she didn't remember who had died young. And then we don't really have a visit during the war, but we have a lot of post-war things. She has a mental breakdown that basically includes a psychotic break. So we have a chapter where she's talking to Franz Kafka, and we have a chapter where she's talking to her dead mother. I'm saying chapter, but again, they're supposedly stories. They felt like chapters. And there are then bits where she's talking to her girlfriend and they're doing things. But then we have other bits that are, she's taking a train ride when the rail service between Sarajevo and Belgrade had just been restored. And we're hearing the character musing on the ticket taker and the locomotives that change every time they change region and country. And all of that I thought was the most interesting part of this. It is written in a way, kind of like the other book, that is kind of intentionally confusing, which is not going to be to everyone's taste. But I think even if you don't like this, I think you'll probably find it kind of intriguing, because it is playing with style in a way that I think is interesting, even if you're not interested in the content. So yeah, this was good. But I did feel like I was reading a different book than other people read, because when people said this is short stories about a lesbian romance, and I didn't think that was what I was reading, but again, you could take that from it too. I thought it was about an exploration of mental state over somebody's life, and as I said, it felt like a novella, but there we go. And since that's all that I've read that I can talk about, I thought I would also do a very short book haul, because I bought some trash. Now, normally I take most of my books out of the library first and only buy them if I wanted them, but you know, remaindered book sales happened, and I had just made that video talking about trash, and I realized two things. One, that despite my talking about how much I like Bernard Cornwell's Sharpe series, I had not actually read the newest one, and the hardcover was like $4. These are close to $40 normally. So I bought myself Sharpe's Assassin. It starts, like, the flap starts with the same description of the character's background. He's a man with a reputation. And all of that. That is an actual quote. I'm not just saying that to be ridiculous, you know. He's a loose cannon, but his unconventional methods make him a valuable weapon. And this is set after the Battle of Waterloo. And what happens here? Who knows? He's looking for a spy in Paris is what's happening in this book, apparently. So this should be some fun nonsense. I'm looking forward to that. Did I need to own it? Probably not. I also, during that video, held up a Beverly Jenkins book, and a couple of people said, oh no, that's good, when I was referring to it as a great example of trash. So I bought another one of her books, which is the second book in that series, because regardless of the fact that people were saying, no, but that's good, you are missing the point. Look at that cover. The clinch cover is such a classic of trashiness. And it makes me so sad that these covers are not trashy anymore. When I started reading this series back in the 90s, they were also mass market paperbacks to start with, and there was a little painting and it would always be a battle scene. It disappoints me that the covers look so classy now. If I'm reading something on the train, I want people to look at it and say, oh, that looks like trash. That's what I want. I don't want them to look at this generic sword cover. No. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't have a commute now. I'm not on the train. But you know what I mean. Anyway, so yes, I bought 2 books. I read 3 books. This is a sad excuse for a video. If you've read any of these, I'd love to hear what you thought. Yeah, have you bought anything for GarbAugust? How do you feel about pretentious nature writing? All things I'd love to hear about. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.